Hello all, I'm Igor Kleeman, new video on my channel. Today, an exciting video awaits, highly anticipated by many of you. Today we will study the Gothic alphabet and learn how to develop our own unique style of font. I'll explain in detail, so all understand. Hope you like it. I will determine what tools can and should be utilized in work. I will determine how to take care of them and where to initiate the process of building your bow. Let's start by talking about tools. The most basic and simplest pen for calligraphy is the Pilot Parallel pen. They come in different sizes. To start, I recommend 6mm and 3.8mm, because a larger size will make it easier for you to understand this tool. The pen itself is simply a classic pen with an ink cartridge inside. You insert the cartridge and write with it just like an automatic pen. It doesn't have any additional features or functionalities beyond that. The set of this pen consists of the following: the handle itself, and inside it there is no cartridge initially, so that nothing leaks initially. This cartridge is inserted separately. Two such cartridges are included in the kit, black and red. You can refill them using a regular syringe. You just take it, insert the needle inside and inject the ink you need. I'll tell you about the ink later, but I recommend buying a syringe anyway. In addition to these cartridges, there is also a protective cap to prevent your pen from leaking in any way. Accordingly, here is a plate. It is necessary to clean your pen slightly in case it becomes clogged and needs to be unclogged for optimal performance. The pen itself is made up of two metal plates. By inserting this plate, which is included in the set, you can clean it in this manner. Moreover, apart from that, if your pen is fully clogged, you can rinse it using water. To accomplish this, there is a pipette provided into which you inject water. Insert it inside your pen. And as a result, by clicking on the pipette, you blow air into your pen. Consequently, all the paint in your pen flows out, it is revealed. And as a result, you have the option to download some fresh paints or inks. Once you rinse your pen with a pipette, it is necessary for you to disassemble it completely. In order to accomplish this, you will need to take the colored plate, lift up your pen, or more specifically, lift up the pen's design. Then you extract the metal nib. Exercise caution to avoid bending it while performing this step. And accordingly, saturate all of this with a paper napkin in order to absorb all of the moisture and prevent your pen from being ruined. Let's discuss what to refill these cartridges with, because the ink in them runs out rapidly. Personally, I recommend starting with such universal ink. It is sold in any stationery store, not necessarily from this particular brand. Allow me to provide a brief explanation of the disparity between ink and turn off, as they are often mistaken, and I still highly recommend ink. Ink is composed of a coloring pigment and a liquid substance. As a consequence, these inks possess the capability to slightly permeate the paper and impregnate it with their coloration. The mascara, on the other hand, is composed of pigment and the substance that binds it, due to which the mascara is situated on top of the paper, almost without soaking it. As a result, it's more contrasting, but the tool needs to be cleaned from mascara more frequently, so I suggest ink. I can also suggest watercolor ink along with these inks. They are made by different manufacturers, but what distinguishes them is that they are budget-friendly, come in various colors, and are easy to use. They're easily washed with water, no issues usually. The deal is, I apply this transfer with this pen, i.e. a drawing on the client's body, i.e. I draw directly on the body. And in order for this drawing to hold up a little better, I use these inks. There are actually many different ones, but I recommend these ones specifically because they hold up really well, and on top of that they are very pigmented, meaning the color is very saturated. In order to clean this handle, after the transfer that you drew on the skin, you will need to use alcohol-based ink, because it is important to disinfect this pen to ensure the safety and hygiene for the future client who will be using it. And secondly, this dye is not very easy to wash off, so it's still better to use a separate pen for freestyle. I would also advise utilizing a surface for flushing and refilling this pen that you do not mind getting dirty during the process. In order to refill this pen, you need to gently press the internal mechanism with a needle and carefully insert it underneath, ensuring proper penetration. This will allow the ink to flow smoothly and replenish the pen for continued use. It is crucial that the ink level is positioned below this plate, not higher, not in close proximity, but slightly lower. Uncertain pen price due to changing exchange rates makes it difficult to determine the final cost accurately. In general, I think it will be enough to try calligraphy with such a marker. He has a flat pen with which you can practice and write different letters calmly. For example, the same. the letter Q, however, the problem lies in the fact that this marker tends to smudge heavily, especially at the edges. However, although he is new, he may not have much experience yet, but this ending will always be a bit rough for you. For a trial, it is perfect, but for work of a more serious nature, I would recommend utilizing a different option. Even if we just compare the Pilot parallel pen and a marker, you can see that the tip itself is much more attractive. Let's attempt to write the same, you'll grasp my point. And the endings themselves are more boxy in shape, and you have the opportunity to experiment with lines that are similar or comparable in nature. As a result of these sharper endings, the work seems a bit more decent to me, which I find visually appealing. Besides the marker and parallel pen, you can also write letters with brushes. Using brushes, you can utilize any ink, paint, etc. Actually, we can even utilize the identical ink to write the identical letters. However, the issue is that when you write with diminutive brushes, everything becomes very blurry, often even stronger, like a marker. Therefore, I would suggest utilizing brushes only when you require a slightly bigger size. For instance, starting from 8 mm, starting from 10 mm. Ideally, the brushes should be 8, 10, 15 and 20 mm. For work on paper and canvas, this is optimal. To write your letter with a brush, you just need to do the same thing, only a little easier. The thing is, the brush still has the property of bending during writing, and you can't press it too hard. Hence, I would still suggest writing in a more effortless manner to ensure that your hand remains relaxed. For this, you need some practice, but as time goes on, you will be able to make these lines a little less shaky. The more often you do it, the better it will get each time. As I have already mentioned, on paper, the lines from the brush blur very much, so for paper I would still recommend the Pilot parallel pen, because it is a more precise tool for paper. It will allow you to press the pen calmly, and you can relax once again and devote yourself to writing. And since we've already covered how we paint with a brush, let's talk about how to take care of it. So you rinse the brush. If it is ink or dyes that are soluble in water, you wash them all out on paper accordingly. If not, rinse in any solvent. If using a solvent, it's better to do it in a closed room to avoid stinking up the whole room. Accordingly, you slightly moisten the brush and wipe it against the walls. Do not apply direct pressure on the bottom, as it may cause the brush fibers to bend, swell and break. Also, after you rinse it, you lightly dab it on a piece of paper surface to remove excess moisture. After soaking, dry the material either lying down or in a position where the fibers are directed downwards to ensure proper drying. Do not dry it up in such a manner, because if you do, the fibers of your material will undergo swelling and expansion. All the moisture that could have remained there will accumulate here, and in this way your brush will crumble and fall apart. This is not good. Let's repeat again. Brushes 8, 10, 15 and 20 millimeters. Everything up to 30 millimeters in total. These are brushes for paper and canvases. If you use brushes for walls, you need them to be larger, from 30 and above. For instance, this brush costs $80. I've already used it multiple times. Also, there's another great tool for walls and canvases, a graffiti marker. Typically they have flat feathers, but you need to exercise greater caution with them because you see, in this case, the feather spreads out even further and the tips are slightly less tidy. If you desire to compose something truly exquisite, then, in accordance with that, your letters ought to be in uppercase. And this is only possible on canvases or walls. To start mastering calligraphy, I suggest first mastering the Gothic alphabet. Each classical alphabet has its own proportions, canons, traditions, and, in general, we will talk about them now. To begin, we will use our Pilot Pro Lipo pen. Let's attempt to draw a square shape for them. To comprehend the proportions specifically for this pen, we must construct a total of 5 squares that are identical in size to this one. These 5 squares will be the height of the letter specifically for this pen, because pens can vary in width, and in order for you to determine the letter size required for this particular pen. To achieve a canonical appearance, it is necessary to create squares that are similar. Once this is done, the entire shape is refined using a pencil, thereby establishing the height of our letter or line. Since we start with lines, the first line is the basic one at a 90-degree angle. That is, we put our hand straight to the line and with the whole hand, not the wrist, we draw the line down, parallel, without hurrying. This is our 90-degree line. In addition to the 90-degree line, there is also a 45-degree line, which is defined as follows. So, you possess such and such a direction, that is vertical and horizontal. Precisely in the middle, you possess a 45-degree angle. So you place your hand in this manner, and proceed to draw a line downwards to the subsequent line. There's also a line at 0 degrees in addition to the 45-degree line. This is when you lead the line not along this plane, but along the end face. And it is in contrast to these lines, that is, thick and thin, that the rhythm of the Gothic alphabet is created. You should also know that besides vertical lines, there are horizontal lines in the Gothic alphabet written in the same way. That is, a line at 90 degrees is written. That's it. Accordingly, at 45 we also place our hand, only now horizontally. At 0 degrees, we perform the same action and execute it in a similar manner as described. 90, 45 and 0. So these are the main lines used in the Gothic alphabet. Let's move on from these lines to the elements already. To write the first letter, we need to first draw a similar square, but at an angle of 45 degrees, not 90. We touch. Here we drew a square. After that, we continue from the same line, accordingly, a line at a 45-degree angle downwards, approximately to the fourth square, all the way to the end of the fourth square. And then we proceed with the identical square, another one positioned at a 45-degree angle downwards. We possess such a line. We have 1, 2, 3, a line consisting of 3 receptions, which is part of our collection. And if we connect now, in this particular line, we will acquire the letter I. Nevertheless, in order for us to successfully complete the letter I, it is imperative for us to add a dot on top of it. To add it, we need to understand its distance. This distance is determined as follows. Since this is already an external elements are determined by the height of 2 additional squares up and down. We make use of a ruler, carry out additional lines for elements that can be easily removed, and from the edge of this line, we place our pen at a 45-degree angle and draw the same square. Here we have the letter I. All subsequent elements in the Gothic alphabet are constructed approximately in a similar way based on this very line. Therefore, I recommend writing it multiple times consecutively, at a particular distance from each other. The gap between the lines in the Gothic alphabet is determined by the width of your pen tip. The spacing between the lines is influenced by the spacing of the letters and the overall design of the script. Ideally, this distance, this, should be equal to the width of your line. That is, this is equal to this distance, which ensures optimal alignment and consistency in your design. So, in order for us to practice writing our elements, we need to write these lines consecutively. Our cell is located at an angle of 45 degrees. There is a line connecting it to the cell that comes after the third cell in the sequence. Square. Next, at the same distance, we should have this line once again, just like before. You have the option to simply proceed and take immediate action in order to become accustomed to this distance without delay or hesitation. Following that, in line with that, once again, a cellular device that is below the age of 45. Once again, a cell. And we continue further. You probably have already noticed that I periodically leave some marks on the corners of these edges. They are frequently found in the Gothic alphabet. Therefore, your alphabet becomes more savage. Therefore, these notches are relevant and, in principle, you can use them. Just in case, I'll repeat again, we write with the whole hand. That is, not with the wrist, but with the whole hand. We wrote our square and drew the line with our entire hand. Then once again we drew a square, also using the entire hand. That is, we consistently enter the hand, not the wrist. you should become accustomed to this. After we have acquired the skill to write our letter I, we can proceed to the subsequent letters. Someone among you may have already realized that some letters, or rather many of them, resemble each other. For instance, at present, by writing the letter I, we can already write the letter L. To achieve this, we take, and accordingly our line. From the top, we lead to the fourth square, and from the bottom, we add an additional square below 45. The line is similar, with an extra upper protruding element added. Assuming we write the letter L, we can then learn the capital letter T. It is also made with an upper projecting element, a square at 45 degrees, but with an additional line at 45 degrees in the same manner. As a result, we obtain the letter T. By mastering these two elements, we can combine and write the letter H. That is, we write L with the upper projecting element too, adding a square. Then place your hand down and create another square. This lower corner of the square should be at the distance, the width of which is this line, so that this distance and this are equal. In such cases, your square becomes slightly elongated. It's nothing to worry about. The line is also at 45. And the square below. A little bit twisted, but the essence is approximately like this, what the letter H looks like for us. Accordingly, where we have the letter H, there is the letter N, that is, instead of the upper nasal element, our letter I with a square appears above and below, and an additional square is added to the existing ones. Line and square. That is another letter I. Our N turned out. In the same place where N is, there is also M. They visually do not differ much, but to distinguish them, you can do one. Now I'll show you how to do it. Look, that is, we write our letter N. Here we have numerous options. Alternatively, we can shape the ending in this manner. Instead, we have the option to make the ending in a similar manner to the one that is depicted here, or create a line that is identical to the letter I but incorporate an additional element. To differentiate N from M in dense letter arrangements, add a middle element like a diamond, square at a 45-degree angle, a line, or try other methods to distinguish them visually. Personally, I prefer it when these elements alternate, so I write the letter M in this way. That is, I wrote the letter I, then I took out the middle line as an extraneous element, and then I proceeded with the rest of the letter. I round this line a little, so this rhombus I write not as a separate line, but I immediately take it like this and take it away. This is the element, when you draw a line and smoothly round it without detaching. I often use it so you can also make use of it, and we proceed to the next letter. Let's proceed. We learn to write the letter N. It is written as follows. And in order to specifically show that this is the letter N, we slightly extend this line from above, in order to have lines at the same distance and demonstrate that it is the top plate, not the bottom one, that connects. If bottom plate connects to us, it will no longer be letter N, but letter U. We're making same element. Extend it a bit. After that, we write another element that is identical to this one. And we got the letter U. The letter U is not very different from the letter V. To distinguish them, we do the same thing. We extend our line to differentiate each other. But we don't add this bottom square. That's how they differ. If we can write the letter U and the letter V, we can write the letter W, because in fact the letter W is written on the connection of these two letters. So we write the letter U. And then we extract the third line from the letter V, namely, we create a rhombus and establish a connection. To make your letter look more elegant, pay attention to this distance, as it is slightly larger than the line width, but not critical overall. Also, in order to distinguish the letter V from W, you can add either a middle element or a diamond, respectively, or a stroke, or an outboard element. Up, it depends on your preference. After learning how to make the letter N, we can proceed to the next step in the process. We have the ability to produce another letter, namely the letter R. It is essentially the same as the letter N, but it does not have this extra line. Due to the absence of this extra line, the space will remain empty, as the subsequent letter will be placed here, resulting in an unused area. The space will continue to remain empty. You have the option to add a tail. How is it done? So you take it, lift the handle firmly, and specifically with the tip of the handle, make such a curl in order to achieve the desired result. Following that, since we have already mastered all of these elements, we can also master the letter J, which we unintentionally overlooked or omitted. So we create the same little square. Next, we draw a straight line downwards, extending it to the border of the lower extension elements, ensuring it reaches all the way down. And we add a diamond on top as the upper protruding element. We get the letter J. To strengthen it, you can slightly wrap this tail a little more, making it even clearer. After we wrote our letter R, we are now able to learn the letter C. That is, if the letter R is written by us in this manner, the letter C is written in a similar manner, just without the top diamond. Consequently, we take it and extend the line to complete the letter. This is the process of forming the letter C in writing. And as a consequence, to occupy this empty space, someone either adds just a single line or inserts another notch as a means of filling it in. But here is the question of what you like more. After we made the letter C, we can do the letter E in the same way. That is, we take in the middle, numerous individuals do it differently. That is, either add such a dash or position it at a 45-degree angle, depending on your preference. This allows for a variety of approaches and caters to personal taste. Following that, once we have produced this letter, we can proceed in a calm manner to construct the letter O using the identical approach. That is to say, we take a rhombus and draw the same line utilizing it. And in conclusion, to wrap up our letter O, we shall proceed to complete the second line of our message. All our letter O is ready. Many still add a line in the middle to attract more attention to the letter O specifically. Here's a question of what you like better. After we made the letter O, we can do the letter B in the same way. It differs slightly from the letter O. That is, we simply take it and begin with the top external element. Subsequently, we once again have our square, which fits into a notch and continues the process. The top element, and accordingly our letter is closed. In fact, it is the same letter O, only with an upper extension element. If desired, you have the option to add a small tail. Once we have created the letters B and O, we can proceed to create the letter D. This letter offers multiple writing styles, and I will demonstrate two of them. The classic version implies that you are like writing the letter O in a traditional manner. But here you begin this tale from here. This is the classic rendition of writing the letter D. Personally, I do not really like it, but it is a matter of personal preference. Personally, I write the letter D a little differently. Let me show you how. So we start exactly the same as always, in the case of the letter O. We sketched a line, included a square at the bottom, and are sketching the identical line from the top projecting component, just like in the letter L. At this point we concluded, and at this point I conclude with a small cut. As a result, we get the letter D like this. You can add a tail here to taste. Personally, I like this letter D better, but if you want, you can use the classic version. Also from the letter O, there are several other letters, for example the letter Q. That is, we carry out the exact same procedure as in the letter O, with the sole difference being that we prolong the second line to a greater extent. So, we finish it with an external element, someone adds a diamond here, someone does just a line to round off, depending on your personal preference. Choose what you like more. I personally prefer more rounding. Further, the letter pi is made exactly the same, only in the opposite direction. And it starts with a rhombus. To make, by the way, such a tail, you need, it turns out, when you draw a line, smoothly lift it at one angle, and accordingly make a curl. I believe that with a few practice sessions, you will achieve success. Afterwards, similar to the letter R, we proceed to create an additional rhombus shape. Move the line downwards, and then we need to perform the following actions. So we utilize our compass to draw a line at a precise angle of 45 degrees, ensuring accuracy in our measurements. Personally, it seems burdensome to me here, so I try to move away from the classic way of writing the letter P, and I write it in a different manner. That is, we perform the exact same action repeatedly until we reach the final moment in time. I am executing the exact same task as described in letter D, but in the completely opposite direction. So, in reality, our letter P is closed precisely like this. And, in comparison, beside the bold lines, in my view, a thin line of this kind appears slightly more elegant. After we have mastered the previous letters, we can master the following ones. For example, the letter K, we start drawing the line from the top outboard element. 5 to the 4th power. Next, we make a rhombus. After that, just like in the letter R or in the letter C, we draw a line, but we take the tail up. Further, at an angle of 45 degrees, we draw a line, create another rhombus of the same size, and then extend the line from it. Here, this ending can also be a bit different. If you take a more canonical one, it's simply done as a rhombus. However, my preference is to round it off in this specific manner. There is another variant of writing that is a little closer to my liking. I already came up with it myself. That is, we carry out the exact same procedure. We rotate our rhombus. Instead of bringing this top line down, we already make it more horizontal, without any downward movement or adjustment. We set the line at a 45-degree angle. And we do it like this. I still really like adding similar elements to all the letters we described before. When I fashion a thin item utilizing the tip of the handle, it takes on a highly juicy appearance in stark contrast. And you can also add such a small notch there. And this thin element we can make absolutely any letters. That is, in the letter B, just like in the letter D, well, in my case, we definitely have the ability to do so. We possess the capability to accomplish this task. In the letters Q the same way, and in general, this adds some detail to our letters, and as a result, the letters become slightly more interesting, in my opinion. In general, this element is made in a simple manner, as I already mentioned. That is, notches are simply created at the end of the line, and you can do the same on the other side. Let's move on to the next letters. Since we have already mastered the letter Q, we can immediately move on to similar letters. As an illustration, the letter G is manufactured using a similar technique, just like the other letters in the alphabet. This is a variant of writing, not classical. This is the way I write it. You can use the classic version of writing. In general, there is not much difference, except for the bottom element, which sets it apart from others. So in this step we proceed to extend the line downwards, create a similar element, and then extend it upwards as well. And add such a tail. So in fact, it turns out something similar to an 8 or a 2, so I still stick to the first spelling.
but you can use the second one. After, we can make the letter Y in the same way. Here, the initial element is the same as in the letter I, a classic line. The same goes further. Maintain your current trajectory and proceed without deviation until further instructions are provided or your desired endpoint is reached. This is my version of writing. The only thing that can be done is to make the distance between the lines even narrower. The conventional form of writing, once again, demonstrates a slight variation from the classic rendition of writing. That is, once more, only the lower part differs in this particular instance of the element. That is, we perform the identical action as we did in the letter G, and include such a line in our process. In my opinion, it appears more like some sort of letter Z or an unfinished 2, so I continue to adhere to this choice. We overlook the letter A. It's complex, written similarly to the classical letter D, with a few exceptions. So you take, and without delay, draw a line to the second element. Conclude the design by adding a rhombus shape. In this final step, ensure that you do not make any contact with the existing lines, and carefully draw a new line that matches the width of your initial line. And you finish the rhombus in the same way with a notch. Then you have options to close your letter. You can either choose to do it in a conventional manner, following the classic approach like this, or opt for a different method altogether. The option that I prefer, which I have already mentioned, therefore you move the tick mark up and add a similar line in order to align with my preference. But specifically, I also slightly modernize the letter A and write the top bar horizontally. Further away from her, I'm already making the same element with a rhombus. Turns out, I'm making the same element with another rhombus, and then, like the letter D, I just make a notch. You can move it a bit more to blend in better. Overall, I prefer this option. You can choose any for yourself. Let's probably move on to the most difficult letters. Let's start with the letter F. That is, here we do the same thing as with the letter O, only we do it with the upper outboard element. That is a line with a rhombus. Further here, it turns out like the letter O, and here again we have two possibilities, either a tail or a line that is under 45. I personally prefer the line that is below 45, but again, you can choose any option for yourself. Next we have the letter X. It is made in a rather unusual manner, so you create a rhombus and then drop a line. That is, the same thing as in the letter I. At the same time, you add another diamond, like in the letter R, and in the classic writing, you just have to move the tail of this line here. You also have the ability to make such an option when you just finish another square in this specific location. And as per, if you truly want to, you can add a central element. Let's rewrite it again. That is, one rhombus, two rhombi. Let's draw a line down, a rhombus, or again here a notch, as in classical writing, or the same rhombus. We can add a central element. See for yourself which one you like more, either a line or a dash, but I wouldn't argue. I personally like another option of writing when it takes up a little more space. In order to achieve this, we require our element to be slightly adjusted. Pull, that is, we write the line not vertically, but at a slight angle, not perfectly straight. Next, we proceed to extend these lines in accordance with the given instructions that have been provided to us. Can you add the mark that I have already shown before? And accordingly here we will cover. Here again, it's up to you, choose whatever you want. Next we have the letter Z. She expresses herself through her unique writing approach. When it comes to classical writing, her style embodies the essence of tradition, and it takes on a form that is reminiscent of the classical era. However, to be honest, I have a preference for a slightly altered spelling. At this moment, I'm going to illustrate it to you. You take, then lower the line down, then proceed forward from this point onwards. create a line at a 45 degrees angle and end it identically to the letter I. Then we add a notch and a tail. Consequently, we have
also turns out to be a tail. Such a pseudo 2, you can write it a little more complicated, but I'm used to some kind of writing like this. And then we have the last letter C left. Many kids write it differently. Someone writes it like this. That is, we start like the letter O, draw a tail. We lower the line down, like on the letter I, except the diamond is positioned in the center. Following that, we proceed to make an additional diamond that is identical to the previous one, bringing the line downwards and subsequently adding a line of the same nature. First version of writing letter S, I prefer it over second. Choose for yourself which one you like more. And that's the end of our capital Gothic letters. Guys, we used capital letters. Besides lowercase, there are also uppercase. However, I don't see the point in discussing it as they are rarely used in writing. So here will simply appear a picture about how they are written. You can safely hone this matter. On the same proportions we used before. It's easy to learn if you've learned uppercase letters, so I won't dwell on it. Plus, in the Gothic alphabet, there is a very popular phenomenon called a ligature. Ligature is when two letters merge into one, that is, one element is superimposed on another letter, resulting in a single letter that appears as two. Honestly, I don't see the point in analyzing them at all, simply because it's not clear where to use them. Now there will be a picture with all the delegates. You can practice without understanding why you need it. But what can be useful is how to translate English Gothic letters into the Russian alphabet, as many Russian letters are not in English. There are many more of them, so let me show you how to make Russian letters in the style of English Igor. If we go back to what we wrote earlier from English Fate, then you can immediately notice that the letter R is very similar to the Russian letter G. This is the letter S, this is the letter E. The letter O, I think, does not need to be explained. The letter B, in general, with a slight movement of the hand, is. The letter B can be transformed, and with a light movement of the hand, the letter D turns into the letter B. Additionally, the letter P and the letter K can also undergo transformation. The letter G in English is very similar to the Russian capital letters D, U and the letter A. In general, everything is very similar. Even the letter X is very similar to the Russian letter X, but there are still a couple of letters that I would like to draw attention to. Let us consider the uppercase Russian letter G. In reality, we have the option to easily use the English letter I and make some adjustments to it. That is, if we decide to utilize and let's do something similar. I believe it will be quite similar. For example, if you keep going through the alphabet, then the Russian letter Z is very similar to the one I wrote previously. Here it is. So we take it, lower it down and continue on with our progress, making sure to maintain a steady pace. Just like in the letter I. All this matter, just as it is in the original letter I. All of this is important. In principle, it can look like the number 3. I think that in principle even really 1, 2, 3. If you write it, then expand. For example, a 2, it will be very similar. There are a few intriguing letters in the Russian alphabet that don't resemble anything at all. For instance, in the case of the letter G, my description would be something similar to this. The letter I, for instance, it would initiate. Following that, let us take the topmost element with an extension, and in reality, you can even opt for the bottom one if you prefer. After that, we add another element, thereby expanding the collection and enriching its composition with the inclusion of this additional component. And as a result, we conclude all of this with the inclusion of such a rhombus shape. You can do it in this manner. I would do something comparable, but with a few variations, such as this line potentially being concluded slightly earlier. As I mentioned earlier, you can add all sorts of tails, bridges, and so on. Well, let's say something like that. There is a very similar letter to this one, the letter F.
That is, we produce the exact same element in the middle, which develops in both the upward and downward directions towards the upper and lower outboard elements. Correspondingly, on one hand, it is written as the English letter D, and on the other hand, as the letter R. Alternatively, you can opt to represent it as the initial of the word dollar or the currency symbol ODO. Both notations are widely utilized in financial contexts. Perform an action that resembles the letter T. Nevertheless, in my personal view, it is no longer entirely reminiscent of Gothic style as if it once was. So, I would use something like that. And in general, any letter can be changed in exactly the same way if you understand the logic of connecting certain elements. Let's suppose we have the letter P, and we write it using a similar key on the keyboard, just like in the previous example. Suppose like this. That's it. And that's it. If we look, this letter P is very similar to the English letter N. More precisely, it is not similar, it is it. And in general, if we understand how the elements of the sheriff interact with each other, that is, these diamonds, sticks and everything else, then you can create absolutely any letter. And if you think further, we can also replace these elements and make them even better and more interesting, thereby already starting the path to our own sheriff. So let's make an attempt to explore one of the letters from the alphabet of Gothic development in order to establish some level of personal recognizability. We write it accordingly, then promptly proceed to the second element, finalize the process with a rhombus, ensuring that the distance is adjusted in such a way that it meets the desired criteria. Between lines, there was another line width. Here we either end with a notch or with some other line, but I prefer a notch. Let's say, here we have our letter A. What can we do with it next? In fact, if you imagine how the capital letter A is written, it is written like this. In reality, we possess 1, 2, and 3. And if there is any conceivable way to enhance its level of interest, then I would take action to execute something akin and comparable in nature and essence. In general, at the beginning, during the initial stages, everything remains the same, and there are no significant changes or deviations from the initial state. Suppose I expanded it. Maybe somehow like this. Well, suppose in order not to strain this emptiness, you can do something similar. After that, for instance, you have the option to stretch out this entire letter, because at present it appears to me that it is somehow compressed. Let's attempt to reach the highest outboard element. No, I do not like this connection. Moreover, I frequently add a small amount of dynamics to enhance the visual impact of my fonts. So these lines I am currently executing at a slight angle. So permit me to write down the method I used to create the letter A in the unique font style that I have developed. So I immediately write it at an angle, wasting no time, right from the start, without any delay or hesitation. Following that, we encounter this element once again. Zasechka, which essentially means the same thing for the present moment. Furthermore, this upper notch of ours, you can even make it more bold. Well, let's say, to make you feel a little more fulfilled, you can add some kind of item or object from below. In fact, this letter originated from this one, just I was improving and modernizing some elements. And based on a single letter, we have the ability to create absolutely anything. Allow me to demonstrate what I mean. Look, that is, in case we take this uppermost element, just like the one I employed in the letter A, and subsequently I will conclude everything based on the same principle and approach that I have been using. In fact, it appears very similar to the letter O, don't you agree? And furthermore, if you continue even further after the letter O, do you recall that we had a complete multitude of various letters forming? But at this point, it can potentially transpire, hypothetically speaking, calmly the letter B. From it, there is also the letter V, E, and absolutely any other letter of the alphabet. And then you simply need to arrange them together in a composition, ensuring that there is an equal distance between each of these letters. In general, your font composition is prepared. Well, the letter E is quite complicated overall. In actuality, we truly extend this structure in the upper part to a greater extent than before. Element 1, 2 here is the uppermost part of the letter, and it is ready. You have the option to continue constructing it in this fashion or in some other manner. For example, let's assume we have executed it in this particular way. And accordingly, this section, it originally came from this location. Just in reality, we slightly stretched the lines and turned them at an angle. That's it, we haven't really done anything else. And further. Finishing. Same. So here we have the distance again, the same as the width between the lines. In order for this section, particularly the letter E, which is 1, 2, to be identifiable to us, there is no requirement to link these lines with each other. Add a notch at most. Everything. The letter E is ready. She looks more interesting, but at the same time more complicated. And it is necessary to find a balance between readability and decoration that best suits your personal preferences. Furthermore, I did not include any extra decorative elements in this area, as numerous individuals tend to do. Suppose some notches are still in the middle of the lines, some such notches there, I don't know, twist all the tails like that and so on. I did not do it, I simply altered the structure. That is, in reality, the details of our letter merely underwent a change. And you can examine such details from various artists with a vast number of them, each possessing their own. By combining elements from them, you can develop your own unique font style. So guys, we discussed how our elements and letters are formed, and how to experiment with the skeleton of letters. Let's now discuss how to combine letters to create a coherent and visually pleasing typographic composition. Before initiating a discussion regarding composition, I believe it is valuable to analyze all the components of letters that are present in font composition. First of all, our composition consists of the main strokes, which usually make up 5 widths of your instrument in a Gothic composition, that is, these elements. Additionally, there are hyphens included in the text, in addition to the mentioned elements. There is a vertical element, there is a horizontal element. Connecting strokes connect main strokes. That is, this one, and everything in this spirit. In Gothic and in any other composition, there are lower projecting elements beyond the main line and upper projecting elements also beyond the main line. The composition consists of voids. For some reason, many people overlook it, but it's crucial for letter and composition recognition. There are voids both inside and outside the letter, and they are very important, including as the main elements for composing rhythm. When discussing rhythm, it is crucial to note that rhythm is created from the elements used. By repeating the upper and lower elements, as well as the main connecting lines, in the inscription and letters, a rhythm can be achieved, resulting in a harmonious visual composition. Thus, your inscription looks much more interesting. It is correctly composed, and at the same time it is readable. Thanks to the fact that you combine all these elements, however, in addition to the rhythm of the elements, there are also other rhythms. As you've grasped, rhythm is vital for readability, as well as for enhancing the visual aspect of our font composition. To enhance our rhythm, we can utilize not just the rhythm of the letter's elements, but also the rhythm of the accent elements. For example, these elements are external, and in fact, in order for the rhythm to happen, there must be at least 3 elements in the rhythm. That is 1, 2, 3. That is, if, for instance, we kept our typographic composition, the next extraneous element would have appeared here, resulting in an interesting rhythm. In my view, a highly profitable solution. Also, besides the rhythm of stressed elements, you can use the air inside the letter to ensure its consistency. That is, as you can see, in this composition, the amount of air inside the letter is always approximately equal to one value. In short, these are 3 letter widths, and it repeats everywhere.
approximately these squares. That is the amount of air. All these letters are about the same, and if you alternate the rhythm of these letters, as occurred in this inscription, then what's inside here is not air, so here is, here isn't, here's also a profitable solution. And the rhythm can also consist of the air between the letters. As I already said, in this inscription we have the same rhythm between letters and inside letters. But if we alternate it like here, then here the amount of air in the letter is 1, the amount letter spacing differs, and when these distances alternate, we get an intriguing composition. This solution is exactly what I prefer, especially when spacing between letters and within letters varies. This visually separates letters and enhances readability. Additionally, decorative elements can create rhythm. For example, let me demonstrate with an inscription. I often use supplementary elements to achieve this effect. Lines thanks to which the rhythm between thick and thin lines intensifies, making our inscription even more interesting and captivating to the viewer's eye. The inscription stayed the same. A few elements were added, and it became slightly more complex. There are quite a large number of these decorative elements. There are notches just on the lines. When you additionally add, and as a result, one more diamond is added to each main element, and your letter becomes more spiky. Here, depending on what you like more, in my opinion, the main thing is not to overdo it with these elements, because these rhombuses, in my opinion, are already unnecessary in this inscription. They could be used if our inscription was longer or if there was more air in the letters. In a harmonious composition, the composition's center and accents are important. The arrangement of centers and accents often forms the composition, whether it is symmetrical or asymmetrical. For example, this composition is symmetrical as we have a defined center in the form of an emptiness, located in the composition center, exactly in the middle of our word. We also possess additional accents that are, as it turns out, equidistant from the center point. These letters end approximately the same way, that is, here, in general, everything repeats. These are the attributes of a symmetric composition. Unlike this one, here the center is clearly expressed by our letter O. And when you create a very large empty space inside the letter relative to other small ones, your center is somehow shifted. As a result, we have an asymmetric composition, but in any case we need to balance it. In this composition, it turns out that we need to make the top tail of the letter H up in any case. To achieve balance, we needed to slightly lower the second main line in order to move it to a lower position.
Thanks to this, the upper and lower protruding elements are balanced. But in order to finish the composition a little more smoothly, we can balance it on the left and right, with the same elements accordingly.
Due to repetition, the inscription has a harmonious composition, but with a shifted center, resulting in an asymmetrical arrangement. In fact, besides these decorative elements, you can add different additional ones. The key is to avoid overdoing it and not placing them too near or too far from your inscription. Ideally, the distance between the letters was equal to the distance between your letters and additional decorative elements. That is, if I desired, for instance, to compose some supplementary element in this location, ideally it would be to incorporate it on some at such a distance. That is to say, you see, this distance is equal to either this or that.
That is, our inscription is readable, additional decorative elements appear, and whether to use them or not is up to you.
So, individuals. We have discussed uppercase Gothic letters, briefly mentioned ligatures and capital letters. We understood how to change the structure of the Gothic alphabet in order to come up with our own style. And in general, this is the sole thing you require to commence developing your own style of font. All other aspects are determined by your capacity to work, your ideas, and your diligence in a professional and dedicated manner. Because only with the help of hard work can various cool compositional solutions be achieved. Only through hard work and diligence, cool and high-quality large projects are being made with utmost dedication. And this takes time. You just need to pass. I think you will succeed. Thank you very much for watching this video.
I hope I assisted you in delving deeper into the realm of calligraphy. Best of luck to each and every one of you.